All right. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending when you're watching this. I thought I'd start reading from Erec Rex. Sorry, I got to get used to this view here. And this is, as you can see, hopefully this is all viewable for you guys. I'm starting on page 190 and going to page 204. So this will catch 5HZ, which is on page 190, and 5P, which was, I think, on page 198, up to 5E, which starts the new chapter on page 204. So if you're in 5E and you don't want to hear what's already been read in these pages from 190 to 204, that's fine. The next video that I will post with Erec Rex will then start on page 204. So those of you that are in 5E, you can skip or watch. And I know that the box is small and in the right-hand corner, but that allows me to see some other tools on here. So for now, my big face is not going to be all over the screen, but that might change someday. We'll see. We're going to be experimenting with this video gig. I've got my morning coffee, so life is good. And page, I got to remember all the voices I do for these characters. Hold up. Okay, so page 190, we're starting with the scene. Joey, you remember this one. I think Trace, you also would remember this one. Crouched down, Eric lunged forward and grabbed the ankles of a young blonde man holding a remote. Without a thought, he stood and swung the man around in a circle, wiping remotes out of hands and knocking people over. People toppled, shouting in anger. Eric let the man go, and he sailed into the crowd, people falling all around him. With space cleared, Eric fled toward the castle. The green glow faded along with his feelings of superhuman strength. This was the strangest cloudy thought he'd ever had. Eric could not believe what had happened. He looked down at his fingers. Thankfully, the claws were gone. It was almost as if he had turned into another creature, or that another creature had come out of him, a creature like a dragon. Eric ran faster. The crowd closed in behind him, more determined than ever to catch him. Shouts like, "String him up!" and "Grab his amulet!" made his blood race. What good did that cloudy thought do, he wondered. It might have saved him for 2 seconds from being attacked by the mob, but he seemed no better off now. Then again he wondered what might have happened to him if he didn't have the cloudy thoughts. Would he have made it out of there? He tore faster through the castle gardens, the horde of people at his feet. "Storm the castle!" someone shouted. "Take no prisoners!" Now he was bringing destruction into the castle with him. He had to leave Elypium now, try to find otherness, and warn Danny and Sammy before it was too late. Bethany was nowhere to be seen. He must have lost her in the crowds. He ran toward the west wing, not knowing where else to go, footsteps hot after him until he got to his room. He flung himself inside and locked the door, but he knew it was only a temporary solution. His pursuers were ready to bash down anything in their way. Eric threw on his sneakers and threw Roscoe's remote control and the archives of Alithia in his pocket, along with a few handfuls of gold, silver, and bronze coins. He couldn't think of anything else he needed. Right before he opened the door, someone pounded on it. He stomped hard with his sneakers, making a loud crash down the hallway. He could hear the person outside run toward it, shouting, "This way!" Eric bolted out of his door and ran for the portador near the royal chambers. Right in front of it stood Jam Crinklecut, holding a silver tray with cookies and hot chocolate. He looked at Eric, gray-green eyes wide. "Madame Bethany likes an afternoon snack after her tutor is done. Would you like, sir, some as well?" "Not now, Jam!" Eric darted past Jam into the vestibule of the portador. "There he is!" 3 men appeared at the end of the long hall, pointing. "Get him!" They ran toward Eric. Jam sized up the situation quickly. Then he winged the tray at the men. Hot chocolate splashed the walls. Cookies flew like frisbees. The tray steadily spun toward its target, clattering into the men and knocking them down. Jam hurried into the vestibule with Eric and slammed the door. "Where to, sir?" "Otherness." Eric could hear footsteps pounding toward them. The screen on the portador was divided into a white section labeled Elypium, a blue one labeled Ashona, a red one that said Aorth, and a yellow one that said Otherness. Jam poked a finger onto the yellow section. Before Eric could find Learn on the screen, Jam pressed the map somewhere in the middle. A click resounded. Jam threw the door open, shoved Eric through in front of him, and pulled it shut. "Thanks, Jam." Once through the door, they found themselves deep in the woods somewhere in Otherness. He wished Jam had asked him where he wanted to go. Then again, they probably would not have had time to find Learn on the map. Wherever it was anyway, he was glad to have somebody with him out here in the wilderness. I wonder where we are. Jam looked around. I do not know, sir. From the appearance of the fauna, it seems we may be in a jungle in Otherness. Yeah, thanks, Jam. I kind of figured that. Other than the portador leading back into the castle, there was no sign of civilization in sight. Can those people figure out where I went through the portador and follow me here? Jam nodded his head from side to side, thinking. It would take them a while unless we get rid of it on this end. Then they'll never find us. Would young sir like me to get rid of the portador? Did he have to lose? He could not go back into Alpium now or even later. That crazy mob of people would find him, and then who knows what would happen. He could end up in a dungeon, or worse. Then how would he find the twins? How would he get to Lerna for his second quest and stop the monsters? No, his way was forward. He gazed wistfully at the portador, then agreed. Let's get rid of it. They'll be out here chasing me soon otherwise. If you want to go back to Alpium, it's okay. And leave young sir out in the wilderness alone? I do not think so. Jam straightened himself and dusted off his gray vest. I go where I'm most needed, sir. Eric smiled. Thanks, Jam. Jam typed a code into the keypad of the portador, and it vanished. They were adrift in a strange, dark jungle. No idea where they were, nor where they were headed. Eric pointed straight ahead. Should we go this way? You're in charge, young sir. That was just what Eric wanted to hear. This chapter is called, I don't know if you can see it. Oops, there we go. The Cyclops. It was quiet in the jungle, the kind of quiet that rings in your ears. Gone were the shouts of the frantic mob that had chased Eric. His ears adjusted to the crickets, soft twitters of birds, little breezes playing games with leaves, and what sounded like a loud belch. Eric and Jam looked at each other, eyes wide. Someone else was out here with them. Nobody was within sight, but they heard heavy footsteps crunching leaves and twigs moving away from them. Oh my! Jam shook his head. It seemed to be sinking in that they really were in the wilds of Otherness, with no idea what lay before them. Do we follow the footsteps? Eric asked, or run the other way? It was a coin toss. Civilization could be a good way to find out how to get to Lerna, as long as it didn't mean getting eaten. He shivered, thinking about what he had heard of the Vogum and other monsters that lived out here. Jam looked uncertain, eyes darting back and forth between where the footsteps had come from and the opposite direction. Whatever young sir thinks. Let's go that way, carefully, and see what we can find there. They set out toward where they had heard heavy crunching footsteps. Whatever had made them must have been big. Jam caught his breath. I entirely forgot. We haven't been inoculated. There are all kinds of diseases one may catch from traveling in Otherness. One usually must get shots before coming here. Was the last thing Eric needed to hear. Like what? Well, Jam said with a sigh, there is the dreaded hat head. It's a terrible affliction, they say, similar to another called helmet hair. He shuddered. Then there's something called the drenchers, not nice at all. Eric wished they'd had the shots, but they'd just have to take their chances. Instead, he asked, Jam, what was wrong with those people in Alpium? They were all acting so crazy. Oh, it's been getting worse there, with everyone riled up over the monsters. We, in the kingdoms of the keepers, have always been more vulnerable to that kind of craziness, since the substance is disturbed here. Makes us a little crazy sometimes. They soon came to a clearing. In it stood a huge stone hut with a peaked red wooden roof. Smoke issued from a small chimney in the center. Eric sighed with relief. Here was someone to help them find their way to Lerna, maybe even give them some food. Eric realized he was hungry. Suddenly, a raging, beast-like growl reverberated from inside the hut. The man in the house began sobbing, screaming. The roar of the beast overwhelmed him. Eric and Jam looked at each other in terror. What was going on in there? Maybe one of the terrible monsters in Otherness had broken into some poor man's house. Maybe it was even the Vogum. Eric wanted to run, but he couldn't leave the man at an awful fate. Jam pulled away, but he broke free and ran under a bush by the house. Jam followed him and whispered, Has young sir gone mad? This is not a safe place for us. I know, Eric whispered. Tell me, what are the Vogum like? Oh, not good, Jam's forehead wrinkled. The Vogum are a term for the two most hideous, dangerous creatures on earth, the Hydras and the Valkyries. When they get together, their powers grow and combine into a terrible force. We call that the Vogum. Eric jabbed his thumb toward the house. We have to help that guy, Jam. Jam's face filled with determination, and he nodded. The windows were too high to peek through. Another earth-shaking holler rattled from inside with blood-curdling growls following it. No! The man cried. No! No! Roar! The monster bellowed. The situation seemed dire. There was no time to waste. Eric had his remote control with him. He barely knew how to use it, but now was the time to try. Maybe he could lure the monster away from the poor man and then figure out what to do. He wanted to throw open the door and burst inside, but the thick wood of the huge door was heavy and hard to move. After prying it open, he ran in with his remote control out. On a huge couch before him sat two of the strangest creatures Eric had ever seen. They were human in form, yet enormous, each with a single large eye bulging from their foreheads. A male one was dressed in a huge sarong tied over one shoulder that looked like it was made of animal skins. The septum of his nose was pierced with a large bone. He clutched a large pointed spear in one of his hands. The female creature next to him was wearing an ornate dress festooned with more silk and beads and buttons than Eric had ever seen in one place. Muscular calves, the color and texture of tree trunks, extended from her dress to the pearl emblemized high heels encasing her huge feet. She held a dainty china teacup with her pinky finger extended. Neither of the creatures noticed that Eric had burst into their room, remote held high. Their eyes were glued to a large television set, showing more creatures that looked like them on a talk show. One of the hideous things on the television was sobbing, and another talked about how every relationship it had went sour. Jam whispered into his ear, voice shaking. Cyclops, sir, back out slowly. Eric took a step back, but froze when the male Cyclops let loose another ear-splitting roar in response to a Cyclops on television saying, Love isn't easy, love isn't kind. The female Cyclops put her arm over her eyes. No! Oh, wait, that's right. She says it in a very deep male voice. No, she said in the voice that Eric had thought was the man's. It's just not fair. I can't take it. The male Cyclops sniffed. His voice was a deep growl. Something smells good, honey. You cooking? No, she said. I thought we'd carry out some Gingelhofer. Funny, the male sniffed again. I smell the blood of an Alopeum man. Eric sniffed, or stiffened, sorry. Eric stiffened. Jam yanked him back toward the door. Then both of the Cyclops swung around and looked at them. Look! Ah! The male Cyclops sprang to his feet and ran at Eric and Jam. Eric scrambled toward the door, shaking. Before he could escape, it slammed shut in front of his face. He looked up to see the Cyclops' hand on the door. A second later, Eric and Jam had both been scooped up in each of the Cyclops' hands. The Cyclops seemed to go mad, running around in his hut, holding Eric and Jam, roaring wildly and screaming, Food! Food! Eric thought he was going to faint. It was all over. No second quest, no saving the twins. He was caught in the grip of a terrible beast who was racing around his house with him so fast that Eric's head was spinning. Jam looked green. Please, Eric prayed, let me have a cloudy thought. Let me turn into a dragon and scare this creature away. Cyclops plopped Eric and Jam onto two small stools, fists tightly clamped around them. He eyed them greedily with a terrifying smile. Eric frantically tried to remember how the monster contest had said to escape from Cyclops. Tripping them? No. Bribing them, that was it. He remembered something else. Miss Anai had said Cyclops loved to crush human bones for sheer pleasure. But then again, she also said that one glance from a Cyclops would turn a human to stone. That didn't seem right. Neither he nor Jam had been changed. Food! The creature roared. Diana, bring these visitors some food. Calm down, Henry, the woman Cyclops with the deep man's voice answered. I'm getting some now. The Cyclops let Eric and Jam go and plopped himself on a stool. Eric wondered if he jumped and ran, would the creature catch him again? Henry looked at Eric and smacked his lips. We don't get a lot of guests out here. Who are you? Eric was afraid to say his name. Maybe the thing had heard about him from Alopeum and hated him too. Jam said, I'm Jam Crinklecut, kind sir. Please accept our visit as a sign of goodwill extended from our simple home to yours. Jam, Henry chuckled. Sounds like you be good spread on toast. Jam gulped. And who are you? It turned its gaze to Eric. Nothing came from Eric's throat. If he lied, would this thing be able to tell? His lips moved silently. "Wait a minute," Verna said. "He looks just like this picture." She held up a black and white picture of Eric surrounded by a black border with some words printed beneath it. "Henry, he's Erec Rex." If Eric had any doubt that Henry had heard of him, it vanished now. Henry let out a wild roar, pounding his chest and shaking his hair in abandon. He stopped so hard the room shook. "Erec Rex! Erec Rex is in me house!" Eric and Jam traded glances, sure this was the end. Jam smiled apologetically, as if to say he'd tried his best. Henry bowed low with a big grin. "I'm honored to meet you. I am honored by your visit. You are more than welcome in my house." Eric looked Henry in the eye and said, "You are hideously ugly." Jem looked at him in shock. Eric gulped, body frozen, jaws clamped shut. What made him say such a stupid thing? He remembered. He was carrying the archives of Alithia. Why had he brought them? The wretched scroll made him say the dumbest stuff. He shook his head, eyelids slowly closing. Henry laughed so heartily that Eric's ears rung. "You think I'm ugly? That's a good one, Erec Rex. I like you, even though you look worse than a older man." Verna set huge plates. So this is where 5P started, or left off, I should say. Verna set huge plates of unidentified meats on their laps and sat down. "Eat, please." Floppy gray items in front of them had smells Eric could not identify. "So are you here to save the dragon babies?" she asked eagerly. "It's the talk of Polyphemus and all of otherness, I hear. It's a disaster that they're all missing. Nobody knows what to do." Eric felt bad. "I'd like help with that. There is something I need to do first, though." Henry said, "We are thankful to you, Eric. You saved King Piter, and therefore you helped us. How may we repay you?" Eric's jaw dropped. Did he hear right? Were these the first people that understood what he had done and didn't think he was a liar and a cheat? His breathing eased. "Well, I need to get to Lerna and find my brother and sister. Can you help me get there?" Henry roared, making Eric jump. "Oh, of course I'll help. Anything for Erec Rex, hero of otherness." Eric started feeling pretty good. This was working out much better than he'd expected. His stomach growled and he realized how hungry he was. He sipped a steaming drink in front of him. In the next moment, he slammed the cup down. His mouth was on fire. Verna raised the massive eyebrow crossing her forehead. "Don't like root scotch?" "No," Eric said as politely as he could. He hesitantly picked up a piece of slimy meat. It tasted like gooey metal, but he was starving, so he ate a little more. "Sorry," Verna said. "All I had left over was giant mosquito liver." Eric dropped the rest back onto the large plate and gagged. Eric and Jam spent the night on the floor on pillows, each the size of a mattress. In the morning, they graciously turned down more giant mosquito liver. As always, Jam parted his hair far to the side and slicked it down with some gel he carried in his coat. Eric wondered why. It made him look silly. He had just started looking more natural, too, after most of it had worn off. Jam excused himself and returned a few minutes later with berries and wild chicory leaves on a small silver tray he had stashed in his dress coat. "A good butler is always prepared for anything." He pointed at bushy green leaves with a ground orange fruit. "Leaves are good for boils and throat difficulties, sir." Eric looked at the tray in awe. "How did you know about this stuff? And have the tray?" "It's my gift." Jam's eyes twinkled. "I'm always prepared to serve." The wild vegetables and fruit tasted so good. Eric finished the whole tray. Immediately he felt bad he had not saved some for Jam. "I'm sorry." "No problem at all, young sir. You must eat first. Jam will help himself outside." Herna kissed Verna, sorry. Henry kissed Verna goodbye with a sound like a truck hitting a tree, then walked outside with Eric. "Well," he growled, "let's see your map. I'll try and figure out where we are and how to get to. Where'd you say we're going?" "Lerna." Eric's heart sank. "You don't know the way?" "No, never been out of Polyphemus. No reason to go." Henry shook his head. "People look too strange other places for me taste. Cyclops are very good at tracking things. I can follow almost any footsteps if I need to. So let's see your map." Eric held out his empty hands. "No map. I guess we'll have to walk until we find something." They walked through the trees until Henry suggested that Eric and Jam each ride on one of his shoulders. From then on, they moved much faster. Even so, Eric wished they knew where they were going. They could well be walking straight away from Lerna and out to otherness as far as he knew. Hopefully they would find someone soon who could tell them which way to go. Out in the middle of nowhere, they came upon a huge metal box with a glass front that glistened between the pine trees. Henry walked close, and Eric could see it was a vending machine filled with small gray balls. The sign at the top read Worm Annaballs, 3 for a gand. Eric laughed. Why would anybody want worms out here? He couldn't see a lake to fish in sight. Soon after, they came to another vending machine in the woods, this one selling animals of all shapes and sizes. The sign on the machine said, Pets, 1 for 2 shires. These were not animals, but real rabbits, dogs, cats, mice, birds, and turtles sitting on little shelves. They looked like they were talking to each other, but Eric could not hear what they were saying. For a moment he was tempted to buy a pet hamster, but he quickly realized that this was not the time. Henry nodded toward the animals. Snack, anyone? No, Eric said. I don't think so. Before long, they found yet another vending machine in the forest. Eric looked into it with curiosity. An old man sat scrunched up inside on a small shelf. His legs were crossed, barely able to fit in the tight space. A long, limp gray beard and mustache hung down his face, and he gazed into the distance as if the sight of Eric, Jam, and Henry wasn't worth a glance. The sign on the top of the vending machine said, Advice, 1 for a shire. 1 advice for a shire? This was too good to pass up. Eric had a pocket full of change and saw no reason not to try it. Why don't we each get some advice? He handed silver shires to Jam and Henry. Jam put his shire into the advice machine first. The old man inside took a puff of his pipe and tilted his head. You should stop waxing your hair down, you look stupid. Jam's face dropped. Eric looked away embarrassed. The old man was right, though. Jam had a pleasant face, but he did make himself look ridiculous the way he slicked his hair to the side. Henry eagerly put his shire in, not in the least put off by what the old man had said to Jam. The old man gazed at the Cyclops with a bland look and said in an uncaring, monotone voice, Your daughter, Veronica, loves you and Verna. She ran off to find true love, but now has learned that the truest love is in the hearts she has known all along. Eric thought it was funny to hear the man say such flowery things with such a dry voice. Henry, on the other hand, threw his hand over his heart and howled so loud it made Eric jump. He ran around screaming like a wild man for a minute, then threw himself onto the forest floor sobbing, Me, Veronica, me dear daughter, we have sent her from our hearts ne'er to return. We're such fools in the world of love, such pathetic wastrels. Henry really did look pathetic, howling and sobbing. It was odd to hear such a gruff-looking creature nattering on about, well, the same kind of things that made him holler at the talk show he had been watching. Eric decided that Cyclops, even if they looked tough, were ridiculously sentimental. It was his turn. He dropped a shire into the machine. The man's stare bore right through him. You're trying to find your way around anotherness. Since you're very absorbent, you can ask the pointing pines to help find your way. Pointing pines. Eric looked around him. Yeah, plenty of pine trees were scattered among the other trees. Were these the pointing pines? He asked the man. How do they work? The man rested calmly, not batting an eyelash, as if he had not heard Eric. Oh, I see. Eric pulled out another shire and put it in the machine. How do the pointing pines work? The man answered with a tinge of sarcasm. Shouldn't care so much what other people think about you. No kidding, it was a problem. He knew, but it was not what he wanted to hear. He needed to know how to get around otherness. How do the pointing pines work? When there was no answer, he kicked the machine. That's it. Yet he knew what the old man wanted. He dropped another shire in. How do the pointing pines work? The archives of Lithia will make you embarrass yourself by forcing you to tell the truth. The old man wore a satisfied gloat as if he was aware that Eric already knew. The advice was getting worse and worse. Eric almost had forgotten what the man's original advice was about the pointing pines. Henry, Jam, do either of you know about the pointing pines? They shook their heads. He thought about what the man had said about him. Jam, what does he mean that I'm very absorbent? Jam was pleased to help. Young sir, being absorbent is a great thing. It means you are in touch with the aether planes and the substance that runs through them. The more absorbent one is, the more power one has inside. You could say you are at one with the energies around you. Absorbency lets you work with the substance. King Piter's ultra absorbent. He also has a device given to him by the fates that make him even more so. Oh, really? Eric was curious. What's that? An aether point quill. If he thinks a question and starts to write with it, the quill will write an answer. You mentioned that quill before. Eric's eyes widened. He said he wasn't strong enough to use it yet, but if he could have found out where Danny and Sammy were. I do not know, Jam's brows knitted. The quill doesn't always give direct answers. It can be pretty cagey. Eric didn't care about what King Piter or his cagey quill. As usual, he would find his own way. He glanced at the old man inside the vending machine. He'd said to use the pointing pines. By now, Eric had dealt with enough things himself, including his wild dragon eye, that he felt confident he'd make the pointing pines show him the way. Okay, so that brought us to page 204. So I'm going to end this video. And that caught 5HZ and 5P up to 5E. So 5E, and the rest of you, because we'll all be together now on this, we will start the next video when I create it. I'm going to take a break on page 204 with a chapter 16 called The Pointing Pines. All right, you guys have a wonderful day.